this will twist your heads.
Welcome to you all at this special meeting. I'm very happy to see so many faces here. I'd like to welcome you all, and especially our guest, Howard Rheingold, which we are honored to have you here. My name is Mary Berghout. I'm from the Mediawijsheid programma. I'm the program director. And Mediawijsheid is the Media Literacy Expert Center in the Netherlands. We've organized this, but we've organized this with the help of the University of Utrecht, where we are here today, and with the special help of two persons who unfortunately could not be here. They are Mirko Tobias Schaefer and Imar de Vries. Very unfortunate they could not be here, but we've managed, and here we are today. I just want to share with you the way in which we came into contact with Howard. It was exactly 10 weeks ago that Howard posted a tweet on the internet saying, I'm going to go to Europe, April 5. If anyone has any suggestions for me to do besides the visit in Switzerland, then please contact me and maybe we can work something out. So this tweet was read by Vivi Swartz, who was so kind to send it to us. And we were delighted because we always wanted to talk with Howard. But at the moment we had no time, we had no budget, we had no location. Actually, we had nothing except very good intentions and a person named Daniel Lechner who was willing to organize this all. He had the help from a student which worked at our place, a stagiaire. By the way, if you want to be a stagiaire at mediawijzer.net, please contact me. This stagiaire is Melle Offringa, and he was so kind to get us into contact with Mirko and Imar, and that started everything rolling. And here we are today, exactly 10 weeks later, due to the perfect, wonderful influence of social media. Without any further ado, I'd like to give the word to Anne Rigney.
Here you are. Thank you very much. Good afternoon to you all, and very welcome on behalf of the University of Utrecht, and a special welcome, of course, to Howard Rheingold. We are very, very pleased to have you here today, and very pleased to see so many people come to listen to you. I'm here on behalf of Cultures and Identities. I have 1 minute to speak according to the storyboard that Daniel had prepared for us, so I'll just be very brief just to say what Cultures and Identities is. It's one of the 15 research areas prioritized by the University of Utrecht a number of years ago, and it brings together a huge number of researchers in the humanities and social sciences around the question how representations, so images, stories, identities if you like, lead to different patterns of inclusion and exclusion in society. And we've been running now since 2008, and one of our major themes has been the question of changing literacies, a project from a comparative and historical perspective about the ways in which the introduction of new media can change, whether this is in the Middle Ages or in the more recent times, how the introduction of new media can change social relations and the formation of communities. So when you hear that, you can be immediately sure of how delighted we were when, throughout this very complicated tweeting and wonderful new use of social media, we heard that Howard Rheingold was in the area and hadn't yet left the building, and therefore that we should get him here to speak to you. So we're extremely pleased to have you all here today for what I'm sure is going to be a wonderful afternoon. So I just wish you all a great listening, talking pleasure this afternoon, and without further ado, pass the microphone to my colleague Joost Rasens, who will give the actual introduction this afternoon. Joost. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne. Again, welcome everybody. My name is Joost Rasens and I'm chair of media theory I was one of the founders in '98 of the Master New Media and Digital Culture, one of the organizers. It's a collaboration of Cultures Identities, the Master New Media and Mediawijsheid. I'm very pleased and honored to give a very short introduction of Howard Rheingold. This is him, but you already recognized him. What more can I say? Howard Rheingold is and always was a freelance writer. He lectured at several universities, Stanford, Berkeley, MIT. He teaches online courses through Rheingold U, so please visit it, an online learning community. And his focus today is on learning and teaching 21st century literacies. Now, one of the most intriguing characteristics of Howard Rheingold is that for almost 3 decades, that's for almost 30 years, he's at the center of what we call now new media studies. And one of the best ways to understand the history of new media, the new media studies, its developments, its core questions, its themes, its theoretical framework, is starting with reading and reflecting upon the work of you. His immense oeuvre is not only reflecting the history of new media studies. Rheingold was actually one of the persons who shaped this new field. To give a few examples, in 1985 he published Tools for Thought. He asked himself how people can use computers to amplify thought and communication, and he introduced the concept of mind amplifiers. 2 years later, in 1987, he introduced the concept of virtual communities. The book, The Virtual Community, was published in 1994. 1991, he published Virtual Reality, the revolutionary technology that immerses you in a computer-generated world of your own making, as we can read on the cover. And in 2002, he published Smart Mobs. It's called an insightful and engaging guided tour through the next communications renaissance. It shows mainly how mobile media enables collective action. So these are only 4 small examples of his immense oeuvre. But what is the importance of this all? I would say the following. According to French philosopher Gilles Deleuze, concepts, and he is a concept maker, are meaningless unless they are helpful to the understanding and solution of significant contemporary problems. And I think that is what Howard Rheingold now is doing for 30 years. To give you one example, and Howard is referring to this example himself on pages 10 and 11 in his book NetSmart, and I cite Howard, "Until my virtual communities article in 1987, there really wasn't a word or cultural category, or I would say a concept, for strangers who lived in different places, yet offered each other sympathy, medical advice, and even financial support." End of quotation. So in line with Deleuze, I would say, Rheingold creates concepts, in this case virtual communities, that make things visible and action possible. And that's of course quite an achievement. After Rheingold published Smart Mobs in 2002, it was quiet for a while, at least for me. We knew that he was working on several book projects, but that was all. What we didn't know is that he was working on his next big thing. And this whole idea of waiting what somebody is actually planning to do made me think of one of my other cultural heroes. That's David Bowie, who published the next day his latest CD after years of silence. And maybe that's one way of understanding the importance of Howard Rheingold. Imagine the importance of David Bowie for musical culture. I would say Rheingold is the David Bowie of digital culture. Rheingold's next big thing came out last year in 2012, NetSmart. How to thrive online. In this book, Rheingold explains how we can use digital media so that we become empowered participants rather than passive receivers. He outlines 5 fundamental digital literacies, online skills that will help us to do this. And we can see it in this quote, his quote apparently, "The human instinct to participate is there, but most people at this stage are not educated in the necessity and opportunity of participation, even though it's relatively simple." And that's what he is going to explain us this afternoon. When we look at this from an historical perspective, the argument, I would say, is always the same. New media of communication or new devices, be it print media, television, film, digital media, require new forms of cultural and communicative skills. And this was already the case with early definitions of literacy. In relation to the print medium, the ability to read, to write, to understand at a level adequate for communication. To give you a short example of this early form of literacy, I will show you a short clip. And imagine there's a guy coming in, and he symbolizes Howard Rheingold. He is the help desk of our time. There's a guy sitting and asking for help. That's basically us. We are asking the help desk for help. And the idea, when a new system is introduced, everybody wants help immediately. And we are saved by the bell. Howard Rheingold is here to help us today. I will show you a 2-minute clip. And I hope it works.
Ja, det er jeg. Ja, bra, ok. Ja, hei du. Hei du. Ja. Ja, hva gjør du? Ja, det er den her. Ja, vil du sitte? Ja. Ja, så det, jeg har ikke gjort noen ting hele formiddagen, eller? Nei, jeg beklager at det er tid, måtte skjønne holde på lenge til helt fysisk, selv, og da skal alle ha litt på en gang. Ja. Så du kommer ikke inn i den, eller? Nei, men ligger der. Har du forsøkt å åpne den? Åpne den, altså hvis det hadde vært så enkelt, så hadde jeg jo ikke tilkalt helt. Det skal det være. Nei. Du har lyst på en hånd? Nei, det skal være fortsatt en hånd. Du bare gjør det. Sånn. Ja, da er vi i gang. Ja, så langt kom jeg også. Ok. Men så stoppet opp, og så var jeg redd for at noe av teksten skulle forsvinne, så jeg turte å gå videre. Åja, ok. Nei, men du skjønner at inni her, så ligger det kanskje flere 100 sider med lagret tekst. Så for å komme videre, så tar du tak i ett og ett ark, på den måten her, og så blar du over på neste side, da fortsetter teksten der. Ja, blar altså. Du blar det. Men jeg skal tilbake da. Ja, da blar du tilbake der. Der, så er du tilbake til den teksten og ansvaret. Ok, så den slutter der, og så fortsetter den der, ja. Ok, men når jeg skal avslutte, hva kan jeg gjøre da? Ja, bare slår du sammen permene. Ja? På den måten der. Sånn. Der ligger alt lagret inni der. Altså, jeg risikerer ikke å miste noe av teksten her. Nei, alt ligger lagret inni her. Ja, det tilfeller seg på fyr på en gang. Ja, ok. For det er noe det at når du har holdt på med skriftruller, så tar det litt tid å konvertere til å bla i en bøk. Ja, det er jo det. Ja, men du vet det før det går. Det bare går en gang til. Altså, jeg åpner sånn, og så, hva du kaller det? Blar. Jeg blar frem og tilbake, og når jeg er ferdig, så bare lukker jeg den. Flott, det er kjempefint. Nei, men vent, ikke sant? Nå er det sånn igjen, nå får jeg ikke åpnet den. Så det er ikke like det her. Åpne fra den siden der, sånn. Der nå. Ja vel. Var det helt manualen, eller? Manualen skal følge med som manualen som brukerveiledning. Åja, den ja. Ja, men ikke sant, det er jo det samme problemet. Får det ikke.
So now you know everything there's to know about media literacy. So this early form of literacy, and not only the ability to read, write and understand, but also the ability to open a book, of course. And the last decennia we saw all kinds of extended forms of literacy, procedural literacy, television literacy, visual literacy, etc. And today there are all kinds of studies that explain what the most important digital literacies are today. Ja? Het licht kan weer aan, sorry. To give you a few examples of today's studies about the importance of media literacy. Mediawijsheid had just published the Mediawijsheid 2013, Developments and Trends in the Field of Media Wisdom, and you can take one copy over there. And we at Utrecht University created a research platform, Anne Rigney already referred to it, Changing Literacies, chaired by Anne Rigney. And two of our publications in this area are Mirko Schaefer's Bastard Culture and Douglas Rushkoff's PhD thesis that he defended here at Utrecht University last year, Monopoly Monies. And in his book Net Smart, Rheingold refers to both authors. And he's referring to Mirko. We need to turn our crap detectors on the narrative of participatory culture. And referring to Douglas, knowing how to program is too important to be left to any elite. That is two of our scholars really influenced, I would say, by Howard Rheingold. For us, media scholars and students, not only in Utrecht but worldwide, Howard Rheingold, you gave us one important thing, the most important thing, an example of how to be a conceptual artist, because I consider you to be a conceptual artist, and I think you were an example for many of us here in Utrecht. It's therefore a great pleasure to welcome Howard Rheingold and to ask him to take the floor and offer us his view, your view on digital literacy. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here. I've been to the Netherlands a couple of dozen times over the last 20 years, and I'll have to say that the conversations that I've had with people here have had a great deal to do with my being able to think a lot more critically about technologies. So if you are concerned, as I am, that our use of social media may be turning people into more shallow individuals, then I wonder, shouldn't we teach more people how to swim so that we can all explore the deeper end of the pool? Recently, there have been some powerful critiques of social media, digital media, and their impact on our lives, and I think it's very important to pay attention to that criticism, particularly to think critically about our own media practices. But instead of asking, the way you search, the way you stream video from your smartphone, the way you update your Facebook status, it matters. It matters to you and to me and to everyone in the world, because the way we use and misuse these media today are going to influence the way people use and misuse these media for decades to come. So instead of asking myself, is Google making us stupid? Is Twitter chopping our attention into micro slices? Is Facebook commoditizing our privacy? All very good questions to ask. I've been asking myself, how do we use these new media intelligently, humanely, and above all, mindfully? And I've talked to a lot of people around the world, and I've interrogated my own practices, and I've studied the literature, and Net Smart is what I've come up with. And what I've come up with is the idea that there's a set of literacies that people can and must learn how to use. And when I use the word literacy in this sense, I mean a particular combination of competency or skill or fluency with a social element. That is, if you're the only person in the world who knows how to ride a bicycle and you've got a bicycle, you're still going to get from place to place more quickly. But if you're the only person in the world who knows how to read and write or put a link on a website, the utility of that medium is going to be very limited to you. So I'm talking about literacies in terms of being able to use the skill to encode and decode, to read and write in various media, but also the skill to use these competencies in concert with others to get things done. I want to very briefly today go through 5 literacies that I cover in more depth in the book. And it starts with, and the fundamental literacy, I believe, is attention. It goes on to participation, collaboration, crap detection, and network know-how. So let's start with attention. Attention is really the fundamental building block of thinking and communicating. And it's one that's particularly highlighted by some of the practices that the media that have just come into our lives have highlighted. You may recognize these are stills from a video that was in a camera in a shopping mall in the United States of a young woman falling into a fountain while texting. And in fact, a survey that was done of Americans discovered that 1 in 6 have admitted to running into something or somebody while texting. And I have the terrifying experience, and I'm sure that some of you at least have shared, of driving at high speed down a highway and noticing that someone else also driving at high speed on the same highway is texting. Here is a picture of Mark Zuckerberg giving a press conference to a group of journalists, very select group of journalists. And how many of them are looking at Mark Zuckerberg? I really started examining this and experimenting with attention when I faced students. And you know, I know enough about universities to know that there are meetings and meetings about everything in the curriculum. But I have a notion that there were no meetings before suddenly making the entire internet available to everybody in a lecture hall. And if you were sitting in a lecture hall today, if you're standing in front of a group of students, wherever you are in the world, most likely you're not really looking at them, you're looking at the back of their laptops. And I realized that my students didn't know what it felt like to look at them and see the back of their laptops. So I stood in front of the classroom, I took a little video with the students' permission, and I then projected that video. I put it online, again with their permission, and I projected it on the screen, showed it to them. And I had a camera at the back of the class looking at their screens. And notice this student here, for some reason, while I am showing the video on the screen, has decided he wants to look at it on his laptop. And then for some reason, he wants to go look at my personal website. And then just before the camera pulls away, you can see he's switched to doing his email. Nothing unusual about this. What's unusual about this is that this is an unusually attentive student. He got a very rare A+ in the class. And I'm pretty sure that if I had stopped him and asked what I was talking about, he would have been able to tell me. So since then, there's been research by Clifford Nass at Stanford and confirmed by others that pretty well proves that most people, most of the time, when they think they are being more effective and more efficient while multitasking, are actually degrading their performance while doing it. I say most of the people, it's upward of 90% of the people tested. What's interesting to me is that percentage at 5 or 10% who somehow managed to multitask without losing their ability to concentrate. And I think that this student was one of them. And I started asking myself, was he just born this way, the way some people can run faster or jump higher, or did he learn something? Did he stumble on something that the rest of us could practice and learn? So practicing with my students, looking into the literature on attention, I came across this notion of mindfulness, or if you want a word that has fewer spiritual connotations, metacognition. And the words may be a little fancy. It really means being aware of where you are putting your attention. And that's one of the things that I started asking of my students. I didn't ask them to close their laptops. I introduced them to a number of attention probes that would encourage them to be aware of when they stopped looking up the words that I was talking about and started Facebooking, of becoming self-aware of their use of media. And I think it's not really complicated. It's just new, and a lot of people haven't been exposed to thinking about what you are paying attention to when you are paying attention to a screen. And certainly we all come up with social collisions. The social norms have really not solidified yet, but is it irritating when you're talking to your friend and they decide that they are going to read a text from somebody else? Maybe in a future generation, when one of you are lecturing in this room here, it will be considered completely normal to pay attention to more than one person at a time. Or maybe it will be decided that that's rude. Of course, rudeness has not left the world, but we do have some ideas about what is polite and what is not. So I do a number of exercises with students and with myself about training our attention, and particularly when we're training the way we pay attention to information on screens, which I call Infotention. That has both an inner component, a kind of cognitive component, but also has a lot to do with the way we configure and use our information tools. So the cognitive component is something that we do every day. You have to make decisions about what you're going to pay attention to. Am I going to pay attention to that cute cat video at all? Or am I going to open a tab for it later? Or maybe I'm going to bookmark it because I know I'm interested in cute cat videos and I don't really think I'm going to look at it later this week, but sometime I may want to go through the entire list. I'm asking students to do what I began to do, which is to take this unconscious process and to slow it down and make it conscious. And so when you're offered with a choice, do I click on that link? Do I pay attention to something that is suddenly offered to me via Twitter, via a blog, so through a link in an email? Why might I want to pay attention to it? What else am I supposed to be doing? Am I going to pay attention to it later? Am I going to tag it for much later? These questions are questions that if you begin asking them of yourself and becoming aware of that process, you can then again make it more automatic. You can make it just as fast as it used to be, but now you make those decisions in the context of a strategy that you have designed, not just simply following the impulses that the media present to us. Now, I also talk to people about arranging their information on their screen in a way that corresponds to what they believe their cognitive strategy ought to be. I talk about spatial arrangements. I also talk about visible goals in the sense that when you're talking about what am I supposed to be paying attention to, that's nothing really that somebody else can dictate to you. You're the one who knows what you need to get done today. So the priorities have to be your own, the context within which you make these decisions. And I discovered a professor by the name of B.J. Fogg at Stanford who had a very short course in establishing new habits. And he said to establish a new habit, start small, make it, find a regular place for it, and repeat. Simply doing that. So when I talk about matching the spatial arrangement of the screen, I use the example of an RSS reader. RSS is somewhat esoteric to a lot of people. Who here knows about RSS? Okay, so here, this is a pretty sophisticated audience. Many audiences would not know about it, but as you know, it's simply a way of choosing a stream of information about a subject that interests you, that comes to you instead of you having to go to it. And I like this RSS reader called NetVibes because it gives you 3 levels of abstraction to play with. You can create a dashboard for an entire subject. You could have a school dashboard, you could have a My Hobbies dashboard, you could have a family dashboard, and the second level of abstraction is that you can have a series of tabs on the page. Oh, I guess there's a pointer here. So these tabs here, you create these tabs, they're your tabs, whatever it is that you want to study. And the third level, under each tab are a series of feeds. And each feed has headlines. And you can very quickly scan the headlines and decide whether you want to click through to them. And what I like about the tabs is that you can drag and drop them. So the idea here is on any particular day, you're going to have different priorities. Drag the tabs that are the highest priority over to the left, and the ones that are maybe the lowest priority, you can drag them over to the right. We're used to reading from left to right and top to bottom in alphabetic cultures. And there are days when I am very busy, so I may simply look at the tab or two on the left, and I also put the feeds that are the most relevant at the top. I may just look at what's on the left and at the top, and there are other days in which my priorities are just to learn and follow whatever links come my way, and I may just click around anywhere on this. This is something that I discovered, something I taught my daughter, who now works at Google. She's in information overload all day long. Take a piece of paper and a pen, good old right brain handwriting, and write down 2 or 3 goals that you intend to accomplish today. When you sit down or stand in front of your computer, what is it when you put that computer away or you move away from it at the end of the day? What is it you hope to have accomplished? And you can see I'm only using, oops, hello, where'd I go? Pressed the wrong button. Hey, okay. You know, one thing I've learned is that if you're not really on the bleeding edge if you're not falling off it. And if you fall off, just mess around until you find your way back. Okay, so you can see I only put three goals, 6 words. Took me about 5 seconds to do that. I put that in the corner under my screen. The idea being that every once in a while my glance would fall upon it. And when my glance fell upon it, I wouldn't try to police what I'm doing. I would simply ask myself, what am I paying attention to right now? What time is it? How much more do I have to accomplish? It's just kind of a mirror, a way of checking in on what I'm paying attention to and what, according to my own priorities, I'm supposed to be paying attention to. The idea here is to simply, back to mindfulness, become aware of what I'm doing, what I think I'm supposed to be doing, and the difference between the two. And I think that sounds very simple, and it actually is very simple, but I think it makes all the difference in the world. When you talk about distraction, you're really not talking about a function of the medium. You're talking about your untrained reaction to the medium. So I get into a lot more detail in the book, but I just want to leave you with a couple of takeaways. One of them is attention can be trained. We know this from thousands of years of contemplative traditions. We know this from contemporary neuroscience. Working on it makes a difference. Breathe. Linda Stone discovered that she was holding her breath while she was doing her email, and she began asking her friends about it and found out in this kind of unscientific survey that most of her friends said that yes, at times they hold their breath. So holding your breath, that's part of the fight or flight response. When our ancestors were surrounded by saber-toothed tigers and they were walking through the forest or the jungle and they heard something, they would stop and hold their breath and listen to decide whether this is something I need to run from or something I need to prepare to fight. And that causes hormones to start coursing through your body. It starts your body preparing itself for battle or for flight. This is very important if you're not going to be eaten by something. It's not very healthy if it happens to you 200 or 300 times a day while you're sitting at your computer. We're not really being chased by saber-tooth anything. So simply, every once in a while you are attracted by your screen, take the time to take a breath. And breath is very important because it is one way of training your attention, of connecting your body and your mind. Attention to intention is how the mind changes the brain. So famously, neuroscientist Donald Hebb's postulate is that neurons that fire together wire together. The more you can bring together a set of thoughts, cognitive habits, the more often you do that, the more easily you can conjure them later. So when you're actually paying attention to how am I using media, how am I using screens, you're changing your brain. That's really what learning is. Is that all of them? Okay. Critical consumption. That's what I started thinking about. When I started looking into it, I came across Ernest Hemingway's quote that every good journalist needs a strong internal crap detector. So I call it crap detection, and I really started thinking about this quite a while ago. So my daughter's grown now, but when she was in middle school, when she first started writing papers and going to the library and making compositions, that's when search engines started. Google didn't exist. They were called things like Alta Vista and InfoSeek. And I realized that someone needed to talk to her about this. So I sat down with her at the screen, something I advocate for parents to do. And I said, something has changed now, something that's been the same for thousands of years, which is that you can get a book out of the library and you know that there was an author and an editor and a publisher and a librarian who all were kind of gatekeepers to make sure that the information that you got when you went to the library is accurate information. And you may disagree with the book, but if they make factual claims, usually you can trust the authority of the text. But now, of course, you can ask any question and get an answer instantaneously anywhere you are, but you can no longer trust that it is accurate information. So one of the things that I did was I asked her to put the name Martin Luther King into a search engine, and you'll notice that the third one down is martinlutherking.org. And it's on the front page of Bing and other search engines as well. So I asked her to click on that, and she looked at martinlutherking.org. How many here know about this site or have seen the site before? So more and more people are becoming aware of it. It's being used as kind of a teaching example. It looks like a site about the civil rights leader. The more you look into it, the more you'll see that it doesn't have a very nice view of Martin Luther King Jr. My daughter asked, well, how can I tell whether this is true or not? And I said, well, there is an author. Let's go look up the author's name. And that was very interesting. Seeing what else the author wrote revealed a lot of what that author's biases might be. But there was no author for the entire website. They have recently changed this, and they've come out from behind their hiding about this. But there's something called Who Is. I showed her how to use. It's a free utility that you can put in a URL for any website, and Who Is will tell you who the registered owner of that website is. And so I had her put in martinlutherking.org, and it turns out that Don Black at stormfront.org is the registrant. And so you search on stormfront.org, and you find out that it's a white nationalist and supremacist neo-Nazi community, something that's not immediately evident on the website. How hard was that? She looked for an author. She looked up the name of the author. She looked to see who was responsible for the website. She found there wasn't somebody responsible for the website. She used Who Is, did a little more searching. This one, this is funny. It's also scary. And you consider that there are a certain number of pregnancies that happen every year because young people are not entirely sure about where babies come from. It's pretty clear that this is a joke as you go on, but it says that this is an online pregnancy test. And the thing is, you know, who's to say that technology cannot do this? Every day, technology, a video camera can recognize your face. Just a couple of years ago, that was a crazy idea. So it says fill in your name and press the Start Test button. And so I filled in the name Joe, and I clicked the Start Pregnancy Test button, and it then pops up a little screen that says sit still while we scan you. And then it says, congratulations, Joe, you're with child. And notice that it has real ads over here. And I don't know whether this is just kind of a link bait to make money off ads or whether it's a joke or a lesson in crap detection or what. And so there's another, you can actually view your baby and see what your baby's gender is. And it turns out it's a girl. Of course, by this time, I think most people would know that this is not serious. I couldn't resist the last button, who's the daddy? And so, if you don't like the daddy, you can pick another daddy. So, here's a website that doesn't look like it's a joke. Nowhere on the website. It looks like a good scientific research website. They have a pioneering genetics research laboratory based in an undisclosed location in England. They claim to have cracked the genetic code of a primate to create this genetically engineered monkey that can understand English. You can type questions to this monkey and it will answer you. And nowhere, and of course it's totally bogus, but nowhere on this does it say that it is bogus or a joke.
You were in the plane yesterday. Did you get the news about Google Knows?
Oh yes. Yeah. Yesterday was don't believe anything you read on the internet day. But yes, there was Google Knows. I mean, at least there's a day in which people begin thinking, is this for real or not? But yes, several people sent me links. I don't know whether they were serious or not to Google Knows yesterday. This is the endangered Pacific Northwest tree octopus, a totally non-existent endangered species. And this is by a group called the Yes Men, who are political activists and provocateurs. And so here they've got a website that they claim is for shell. For hundreds of years, explorers have battled the Arctic. Today, we're finally winning. So it's about why global warming is a good idea, because you can travel through the Arctic now and get oil in ways that you weren't able to before. There are an increasing number of what are called AstroTurf websites that are actually sponsored by a particular cause, a commercial or political cause, and which pose as grassroots organizations, and they're getting harder and harder to detect. So again, as I told my daughter, think like a detective or like a journalist. Don't assume when you find something or something is sent to you on the internet that is true. It doesn't take very long to check it out. Look for clues. Sometimes you just want to find out where is the nearest pizza place. But if you're really searching to learn, you want to go beyond that first search query. You want to go past that first page of results. You want to use more than one search engine. You might even want to use DuckDuckGo, which is a search engine that does not customize its searches to you. Both Bing and Google know what your search history is, and they customize the results of searches. Look for authors, search on their names. Very simple, very powerful. Triangulate is something that professional journalists do. Try to find 3 independent sources before you pass information along. I really had a lesson on this on Twitter. I was on Twitter, paying attention to Twitter one night when the information came across that the country of Egypt had shut down the internet. This was during the January 2011 revolution there. And that comes into the category of interesting if true. Before retweeting that, before passing that along to people who pay attention to me, I thought I'd check. There was nothing on CNN, there was nothing on Al Jazeera. I didn't want to retweet that until I got some confirmation of that. So I put out a tweet. I asked people for pointers. Several people pointed me to different blogs that were coming out of Egypt. They all went back to one blog post from one blogger. So I counted that, but I counted it as one piece of information. Someone else reminded me of Ping, another internet utility that enables you to find out whether a website is up or down. And none of the Egyptian sites I looked for were up, so that was a second piece of information. Finally, somebody turned me on to someone I know to be involved in creating an automatic translation for Middle Eastern languages, who was speaking to someone in Cairo who said that, yes, the internet was down there. So I then retweeted that and helped spread that news. It was 40 minutes between my noticing that and it appearing in the major news media, BBC, Al Jazeera, CNN. And I think that you'll continue to see Twitter and other media like it being ahead of the news. Not long after that, there was another case in which they were ahead of the news, in which there was a tweet that was very widely retweeted that after the earthquake in Haiti, that if you texted a certain number, that would contribute money to sending medical personnel to Haiti. And that turned out to be a cruel hoax. So I encourage people to use different means of checking information before they pass it along. There's a book called The Filter Bubble by Eli Pariser a couple of years ago, last year. And before that, there's a social scientist by the name of Cass Sunstein, who was afraid that now that we can all roll our own media, more and more of us are paying more and more attention to sources we agree with. Is that going to contribute to increasing polarization when people only pay attention to sources they agree with? So if nobody in your network annoys you, you are in an echo chamber. That means that you really should cultivate sources of information, whether it's a human or a media outlet that you consider to be honest and intelligent, but with whom or with which you strongly disagree at times. The annoying part comes in because you disagree with it. Sometimes that disagreement that annoys you, it turns out that they're right and you're wrong, but you're never going to know that unless you pay attention to things that you don't agree with. Participation, we wouldn't be talking about the web at all if it wasn't for participation. Web was not created by a government, it wasn't created by a corporation, it was created by a lot of people putting up websites with links on them. And just a few examples. There was a fan site for readers of the Harry Potter books in which people pretended that they were in the Harry Potter world and they wrote a newspaper from Harry Potter land. That fan site got a cease and desist letter from the attorneys for Warner Brothers because they claimed it infringed on their ownership of that copyright. And Heather Lawver organized a worldwide boycott of Warner Brothers that backed their attorneys off before they found out that she was 16 years old. There was a very obscure blogger by the name of Bev Harris who was obsessed with the voting machines manufactured by the Diebold Company. These are the voting machines that much of the United States and the rest of the world uses for elections, and Diebold did not disclose its source code. They would not tell people exactly how it worked. And Bev Harris, because she was obsessed, was constantly looking through Diebold's website, and one day she found their source code on an unprotected web server. So she spread that around, and although she was an obscure blogger, much less obscure bloggers picked it up, became a big deal. Students at Swarthmore University put it on a server there. They were sued by Diebold, and the US federal court found in favor of the students. You may recognize Wael Ghonim, one of the young people who used Facebook and YouTube and Twitter, among other media, in organizing the Egyptian revolution of 2011. And of course, by now, we are accustomed to teenagers inventing new industries and becoming billionaires in their dormitory rooms. And so I emphasize the youth of these people to point out that if you know how to participate, you can wield real power. You can wield economic power, and you can wield cultural power, and you can wield real political power. I like this depiction of the power law of participation that Ross Mayfield made, which is that he on one axis here, he's got the low threshold with using the tool. So it doesn't take a lot of knowledge to just read a website. Maybe it takes a lot of knowledge to lead a virtual community or a collective intelligence. And then on this axis here is engagement with the community. Again, it doesn't take a lot of engagement to just read something. It takes a lot more engagement to collaborate. But the point about this is that this curve here is that if you start out with low threshold and low engagement, increasingly you become more and more of a participant and a benefactor of collective intelligence online. So any kind of participation really, I think, is extremely important, even though it may seem to be trivial, it contributes to and leads to forms of participation that have a great deal more power. So I'm going to talk about one particular form of participation here today. I get into a lot more detail about others in the book. Curation. Making decisions about what you think is useful information online, explaining why it's useful, and making those decisions available to others. We all need to transform that fire hose of information that we get every day into a useful stream for ourselves. And in the open source world, they call it scratching an itch. If, for example, you are a Linux user and there's a new printer comes out, and there's not a printer driver, there's not the software that tells the printer how to work existing for that new printer. If you write a new printer driver, it benefits the community and it benefits yourself to contribute it to the public code. You're not just signaling that you are a useful citizen of that community and others may want to do you favors when you ask for it. You're actually recruiting a team of people who, when they change that printer, are going to help you change that code. So scratching an itch. You have to tag, bookmark, make selections for yourself anyway. The real genius of what started out as social bookmarking, Delicious and Digo, and now many sites like Pinterest, is that there's no additional cost, either financial or in terms of your time or attention, to make those choices public. When millions of people do that, then those individual choices add up to a valuable public good. If you want to establish a reputation as an expert in a domain, then curating information about that domain, spending an hour going through the web and saying, I spent an hour and I looked through 50 sites and here are 3 that are important and here's why. Not only are you increasing the amount of quality information on the web, but you are establishing your own expertise in that domain. There's something called search engine optimization that a lot of companies use in order to have search engines find them when people are doing searches. Curating something is like personal search engine optimization. If you are curating a particular topic, you are sending out a signal to everyone who's searching for information about that topic that you're someone to know. You're someone who has something to contribute. And it also, I think, shades into what I will talk about in terms of network know-how. Social capital, the capacity of a group of people to get things done together outside of formal structures, rests on networks of trust and norms of reciprocity. And you can see it on Tumblr every day. There's no easier way to do that than to curate and to point attention to others' curations. So I got the term participatory culture from Henry Jenkins, and it's the idea that a person who considers herself a creator of at least part of the culture that she consumes online has a very different sense of herself as a citizen, a very stronger sense of agency than someone who considers himself only a passive consumer of what is created by others. There are a jillion ways to participate online. There's a new one coming up every day. I like to play with them. Nobody is going to be a master of all of them, but I think encouraging people to not be afraid to play with it and to find media that are particularly attractive to them is important for the health of the information commons and important for all of us as individuals. So don't just consume, create. You know, Facebook is in the process of trying to enclose the internet. There are an awful lot of people who think that Facebook is the web. We wouldn't be here if it weren't for individuals. If we're going to maintain a healthy, growing, changing commons in which a physicist in Switzerland thinks it's a good idea to link websites together and creates the World Wide Web, or a couple of students think that there's a better way to search and create Google, that's going to happen only if we maintain a participatory culture. There's something about the architecture of participation online that enables individual acts of self-interest to add up to public goods. You know, some of you may remember Napster. I'm sure you all remember the story of Napster. Millions of people were stealing music online. And when they were doing that, when they were downloading music, they weren't downloading it from a server. When you go online on Napster to download music, what the server does is it shows you all the other people who are online at the moment who have that music. So by default, when you download music on Napster, the place it downloads music, the folder, the directory on your computer, that is by default open to anybody else who's searching for it. So they created an architecture there that made it, that created the vast dictionary of music. Curation, it may just be using Pinterest to collect pictures of puppies. It is, however, the beginning of learning how to wield collective intelligence. I think it's important to check out, just for a little while, what the norms and the boundaries are of a group, whether it's a blog platform or a virtual community or Tumblr or Twitter, before you participate. And again, back to triangulation. Craft detect thyself before broadcasting questionable information. There's nothing that individuals can do about the people who have a vested interest in pumping out bad information. There's everything that all of us can do about not passing bad information along. Collaboration, there are so many different forms of collaboration. I've written books about them. Smart Mobs, I wrote this book 11 years ago. I don't need to go through any stories to tell you that people with access to the internet and a mobile phone can organize collective action in places and at speeds and with people they were never able to organize before, for better and for worse. This is still in play and we don't know where it's going. When I started writing about virtual communities, it was very difficult to explain to people that you didn't have to be either an electrical engineer or pathological or both to communicate with people online. Today, whether you're a gamer or you're a person with a serious disease or a caregiver for someone with a serious disease or any one of 100,000 other interests, you are probably communicating on a regular basis with people that you have not met face to face. Now people are putting their computers' power together to do things that computers were never able to do. It started with looking for the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, downloads information from outer space, radio signals from outer space, turns it into digital material. Computationally intensive, taxpayers don't pay for it. But if you go to SETI at home and you download a screensaver, when your computer goes to sleep, screensaver wakes up, downloads some of this material, some of this signals from outer space, looks for patterns. I'm telling you this story not because they found any messages from little purple people. As far as I know, they haven't. But at one point, they had the most powerful supercomputer in the world, where a few thousand volunteers had 20 trillion operations per second of computing power. And now, if you go to folding.stanford.edu, you can help biomedical researchers understand how proteins fold, essential to curing AIDS, finding medications for cancer. They've created a game of it called Fold It that's available on the Xbox platform. And in fact, a group of Fold It gamers a couple of months ago discovered something important about the enzyme protease, which is very important in AIDS medications. Crowdsourcing you usually think of as a company taking advantage of its customers for its own behalf. This is Jim Gregg. He was a computer scientist. His sailboat went missing on San Francisco Bay a couple of years ago. Didn't come back that evening. His friends were able, because he was a computer scientist, he had a lot of friends in that world, they were able to obtain recent photographs of that area of the Pacific from Google and from NASA. Microsoft engineers divided it up into 500,000 images, and Amazon put it up on their Mechanical Turk platform that enabled thousands of people to search through these. They looked through 500,000 images from 3 satellites in a couple of days. They never found Jim Gray, but I think what's important about this is that they crowdsourced this just from tools that were available online in a matter of hours. Who would have thought that Wikipedia would be what it is just a few years ago? It's not the end of collective intelligence. We're seeing from fan communities to scientists, to citizen scientists, people putting little bits of knowledge together to add up in a big way. And we're seeing a kind of learning available now that was not so easy before, using these same media. And obviously I think there's a connection between all of these things. And I think that knowing how to use the media that are available to this, if you can afford a smartphone or an internet connection, most of these are free of charge. What the missing element is know-how. If you know how, you can organize smart mobs, virtual communities, collective intelligence, crowdsourcing, tremendous power available. We are at the end of the paradigm of what people are told by their culture and what scientists believe in terms of competition being the overriding way in which organisms and humans get things done. If you want to see me elaborate on that, I did a TED Talk about this called Way New Collaboration. Collaborations climb that same curve of participation. There's a wide variety of ways to participate, and if you want to get people to participate, don't send them tasks to do, enable them to elect the task. You know, Antoine Saint-Exupéry said that if you want your people to go to sea, don't organize them making sails and building hulls. Teach them to long for the immensity of the open seas. People contribute for a lot of reasons. Research on why people contribute to open source code revealed that learning how to program was the #1 reason. Establishing a reputation that could later be monetized. Making friends, social reasons, and contributing to a public good. And it turns out that some of the research indicates that having a mixture of motives is important. It's more powerful than having strictly altruists trying to do something. Casual conversations, kind of stuff you see in comments on blogs, on YouTube, on Twitter, that may seem trivial, but it enables people to get to know each other, to trust each other, to climb that curve of collaboration. So in the interest of time, I'm going to go through this last part very quickly. But I think that understanding how networks work and their part in our lives is an essential literacy these days. There's a lot of little bits of knowledge that have been scattered around a lot of different disciplines for quite a while. The network science has recently revealed that the structure of networks has a great deal to do with what is possible to do in those networks. The 6 degrees of separation, small worlds idea, the idea of the power law of the long tail. These are all recent ideas. They're not particularly complicated. It's important for anyone who participates today to know. Irving Goffman, a sociologist, decades before the internet, wrote about the way we perform our identities for others, the way in which all kind of public communication is a form of performance. Essential today, you know, when I talk to parents and kids, I say, you know, that there's some facts of life that are true now that were never true before. There's always been teenage drama, but now everything you put on the internet is there forever. Everything you put on the internet is searchable and connectable to your name. Everything is reproducible infinitely, and it can be distributed around the world in a fraction of a second. We're now in a world of networked individualism in which we all carry our social networks with us. Issues of reputation and social capital, the difference between bridging capital and bonding capital, become essential to people who are trying to live online. The idea of strong ties and weak ties is very important. We can only maintain about 150 strong ties. That's the Dunbar number. But Facebook and other social networks enable us to maintain a very much larger network of weak ties. What does that mean? If your house burns down, you're more likely to stay with someone with whom you have a strong tie. You're more likely to find a job or a spouse through your networks of weak ties. So we all need portfolios of all of them. Now we're living in an age of social media and viral media in which the information society is becoming much more of a network society, and network publics really hold the key to what kinds of governance we're going to have in the future. And it's the interconnection of these little bits of knowledge from different disciplines, I think, that makes the literacy of networks important. So networks have structures that influence the way individuals within those networks behave. Having both strong and weak ties is important and useful. And you know, it's not the number of friends or contacts you have. It has to do with how many of them have to go through you to get to each other, what social network analysts call centrality. That's important. Diverse networks are more important than expert networks. If you take a group of people and they're all experts on a subject, you take another group of people that have some experts and a lot of people who don't know anything about the subject, the diverse network is more likely to come up with better answers. And people who can bridge networks stand to benefit from it. This research was done offline, but I'm pretty sure that it's going to be replicated online. That doing a favor for others is the strongest predictor of whether others will do favors for you. So without a doubt, the technologies are going to continue to change. I suggest it's important not to try to keep up with the technologies, but to keep up with the literacies.
Howard, thank you very much for this very engaging talk. Yet another face. My name is Michiel de Lange and I'll do a quick Q&A with you. So if there's anyone who would like to ask a question to Howard, please raise your hand. And there is 2 microphones in the room, I believe. One is operated by Melle, if I'm not mistaken. If not, I'll be walking around with the microphone as well. But before we start with the Q&A, I would like to point out that in case you haven't managed to find out yourself, there's also a Twitter hashtag floating around, which is MWUU, MWUU. So if you care to tweet in an engaging way also about this talk, then please feel free to do so. All right, well, who would like to ask a question to Howard? There's only one microphone. Okay, so I'll be walking around with the microphone. Please raise your hand if there's a question, and I'll try to come over to you. I'll keep it.
Howard, thank you for your talk. I have a question about your last remark, keep up with literacies and not with technologies. However, I'm wondering whether the emergence of big data and of ever more invasive computing, such as Google Glass, does not compel us to keep up with technologies and to ask questions about literacies. We might think that we control what we put out on the web, but using big data and all the information we are releasing automatically, it becomes more and more feasible to find out religious orientation, sexual orientation, political orientation of people just by analyzing their network, their likes, what they're liking, etc. So does this maybe need to invite you to write another chapter for NetSmart dealing with these technologies, or is it just intensifying what you said already?
Well, I think you know, you read the book, that I did get into the privacy issues that accompany our use of online technology towards the end of the book. And of course, that could be, and will be by many people, an entire book. The ability to put a lot of little pieces of information together and come up with a very detailed portrait of individuals becoming much more refined. I read just yesterday about research in which someone can take pictures of individuals and from that get a pretty good guess at part of their social security number using facial recognition and Facebook and some other means. And so that's just, I think, a very weak example of what those who have a great deal of knowledge and access to data. So I think there's two things here. Who has access to all that data? That's an important political issue, and I think that it requires awareness before it becomes a political issue. And the other aspect is one of literacy. Do you know what is being done with information about you? You know, I'll have to say that I was one of a few people who wrote about this 15 and 20 years ago. If you look at my name and the word data valence, you'll find a column I wrote in 1995 about it. That was just when the transponders were beginning to develop, where you can cross bridges and highways for without having to stop and pay cash. And I and other people pointed out that this is just one bit of data, and when you use a credit card, that's another bit of data. The U.S. National Security Administration is building a server farm with 1 million square feet of servers so that they can take all of the phone calls in the world, all of the email in the world, all of the credit card transactions, all of the transponders, and apply artificial intelligence to that and make a lot of good guesses about it. So then we're entering Foucault territory. This is power and counterpower, and what do the authorities and the power and the wealthy, what do they know that everyone else doesn't know? And so that's really a political issue, and I think that the number of people who care about it is important. Nobody really cared about it when I wrote about it 15 or 20 years ago. It's sort of a little bit late to start caring about the technology now. I don't think that the technology is going to go backwards in that regard. People may and ought to pay attention to what information they voluntarily provide. We involuntarily provide a great deal of information to others who want to know things about us. I think it's also important to know that most of this information is being used by people who want to sell us things. It's also, Orwell had this fear of Big Brother, of the state spying on us. Orwell never realized that your neighbor could be the spy. If you cut somebody off in traffic and they get a look at your license plate, your ex-spouse, your neighbor that you may have had a fight with, all of those people have power over you. And so I think one important distinction to make about privacy is there's privacy about can people look in the window and see you with your clothes off, and then there's can people access information that gives them some kind of power over you. And I think that's an important distinction to understand.
Okay, thank you, Howard. There were a few other questions, I believe. Please raise your hand if you have another question. And maybe I'll first start with the people over here before you make me play a human version of Pong throughout the room and going back and forth. Is there anyone on this side of the room who would like to pose a question? And then I'm going to move over there. Yeah? All right, in the back.
Okay, thank you. I'm Peter Necken, professor in parental mediation and also working at the Erasmus University, Rotterdam, and Netherlands Youth Institute here in Utrecht. Around the world, there are several initiatives about a week free of media, screen-free media, for example, the commercial-free for children, and in Canada. So what is your opinion on such a week? Does it help getting more involved in the media and more critical about it, or is it just seen from the perspective of anxiety for the media and the negative sides?
Well, I have friends who do a weekly media Sabbath. They don't pay attention to their computer or their telephone for 24 hours. And I do that sometimes. I don't do it regularly. I think it's a great idea. I think what's great about the idea is going back to mindfulness, of making people aware of the degree to which it is very, very difficult, if not impossible, to not be connected all the time, and that there is a particular experience of being disconnected that has value to it. So I will have to say, I walk every day. I walk for my health. I also walk because my dogs insist on it. And when I get to the place where I take the dogs off the leash, I turn off the iPod, I turn off the audio book, and spend a half an hour with my thoughts and without media. And as a writer, it's incredibly valuable to just kind of go over, allow things to come up. When things are not coming in, things come up. And I think one of the, certainly I'm not the first person to point this out, but all those little periods in the day when we had time for thought, when you're waiting for a bus or you're waiting in line at the bank, mostly people are now online looking at their phone. And so there's a lot of, I think, opportunity to be alone with yourself that we've lost. And so, a half an hour a day when I'm walking my dogs is not a big deal. I'm not going to find 500 email messages when I get home. I'm not going to lose some kind of opportunity. And I think there's this phrase, FOMO, fear of missing out, that I think is becoming epidemic. And I think just like mindfulness of where you're paying attention is important, I think understanding that you can be alone with yourself without media, and not only will that not hurt you, but there is a value to it, is I think an important value. I think particularly when you're talking about small children these days, it's extremely easy to shut them up by handing them an iPad. And there's such a difference between other toys and an iPad, because it's magic. You can point your finger and you can make things happen. And any of you have ever given an iPad to a very young child, like a 2 or 3 year old child, they can reconfigure that thing in ways that you cannot undo. They can know how to get deep into it. They may not know it up here, but they're just feeling their way into it. And I think that a certain amount of that is healthy and important, but not very much of it. I think that when you're very young, when you're 1 and 2 and 3 years old, you need to spend a little time in the physical world, manipulating the physical world.
Howard, I want to give somebody the opportunity to pose a last question, and I think it was somebody up here. And for a change, I'll hand you the mic, but please keep it as briefly as possible.
I'll try. My name is Bob Wissink. You formerly mentioned the name Eli Pariser, the filter bubble. Yes. It's perhaps a mild form of the first question, the big brother, but it concerns, and I think it's a danger, and I want to ask, do you have any solutions to break down the bubble, and who should do that? Is this only political? Is it governmental? Should we do it in education?
So just very briefly, what the filter bubble refers to the fact that the major search engines know what you've searched for. And they're interested in maintaining your attention by giving you information that's more relevant to you. So every person who uses the search engine for very long, they're actually seeing a different set of results from another person who's asking the very same question. I mentioned DuckDuckGo. So there is a search engine whose competitive advantage, their claim to competitive advantage, is that they don't record what people's searches are. So every time you search on it, it's a fresh search. So I think that it's probably never going to be as rich as Google or Bing, but I think that the fact that they're able to stay in business indicates that they offer a service. I think, again, it's a matter of literacy. How many people know or care about this to do something about it? And you can disable different kinds of tracking on your search. The technologies do make it available, but you've got to know where to find it. It's just like Facebook and privacy. There are all kinds of privacy controls on Facebook. There are hundreds of them, and they change them every day. Who cares enough to go in and learn about it on a daily basis?
Excellent. Thank you very much, Howard. For now, we're closing the session. We're going to have a 15-20 minutes break. We're going to be back here at 4 o'clock with a sort of a college tour type of Q&A session with some questions that have been prepared in advance. Thank you all, audience, for your questions. And, of course, thank you, Howard, for your beautiful talk.